All right, so today we're going to delve into the world of online computer labs. And as most of you know, there's been a significant investment made throughout the last few years in people getting the NetLab Plus product and using that and sharing it and building hubs and this, that, and the other. And it's a very good product. We like it a lot. And then, you know, as the uses have expanded of things we need, Paula, who has a background in working in private industry and looking at seat-based or cloud-based type services, was very eager to look at something else that didn't require an investment and installation and a lot of that sort of thing. So I believe, Paula, that was your basis for looking at practice labs and some others. And the main point I'm trying to make here is that we're kind of platform agnostic as a ICT sector team here. We think that the main purpose of this webinar is to inform our constituents out there as to what's available and what choices they have. And so we're happy today to have Practice Labs join us and Paula, the Deputy Sector Navigator for the Central Coast. And it looks like we have John Raseska from Practice Labs, and I believe Ricky Doyle from Practice Labs, and Ed Garcia from Moorpark College. So we have the Deputy Sector Navigator, a college user, and the supplier all together. So it should be a very interesting dialogue. With that said, I'm now going to bow out and let Paula take it over. You want to get us started, Paula?
Okay, great. Let's see. I will, as soon as I see where I can share. Just 1 second. There we are. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. So just to cover the South Central Coast region, the South Central Coast region serves community colleges in San Luis Obispo County, Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, and Northern LA County. So it's made up of 8 community colleges and their respective K-12 partners and universities. Let's see. There we go. Sorry. Working with 3 screens. Okay, so the reason I bring forward, and as Steve mentioned, is my background, is because I want everyone to understand that I was coming from this perspective from a business perspective. I was in IT for 27 years, and I was responsible for the whole IT department and had a budget of $2.5 million. And with that responsibility, I many times had to select solutions for the organization. So with that said, that's how I approach this virtual lab project from a business perspective. I came to the table just in general before we really started drilling down into vendor selection of wanting to have an off-premise, either cloud-based or commercial data center versus on a premise of a community college. Again, the focus was to make this a regional solution where it's not hosted at any of the community colleges. And it would not require technical FTE that the community colleges would have to invest in. The other piece was simple use, easy access just through internet access, and support for not only the students, but the faculty, and the licensing to be truly regional, not so many seats per college, but bundled together, and aligned with industry certification, so there's the employability for the students once they complete, and it aligns with what the faculty wanted. So that, going into this conversation, that's where the premise was. Now with this, it was important to keep it regional and to partner with a nonprofit. In my situation with partnered with CINED, and CINED provided assisted in vendor analysis, project management, and subsequently the license management. But again, this was not the only project that I was working on. So having a partnership with a nonprofit or another entity really assists in the process. So I'm not going to go through all the various hurdles that we may have had, but to get to the point that we ended up applying design thinking process or customer in mind using the structure from Amazon Web Services. Now, how this came to be, I was trying to recall, and it ended up just, I was having a conversation with Amazon Web Services on another subject, and I asked them if they had a cloud solution for virtual labs. And they said, not necessarily at this time. However, we have just done a partnership with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and they are looking for challenges to help solve problems. So the DX Hub, or the Digital Transformation Hub, we ended up our project being their first challenge, and now they're doing international challenges. What that means is that it was a partnership between Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and Amazon Web Services to help nonprofits and government and community colleges, in our case, to solve deep problems that they need solutions to. It's structured, they call it a two-people team. And the team structure was from the South Central Coast region of faculty, IT staff from their colleges, Amazon Web Services engineers, Cal Poly staff, and CINED. So we spent 2 days together doing design thinking and keeping, again, the customer in mind. And we identified the customers not only as our students, but our faculty and the institutions themselves for the solution. Now, the next steps was to create some kind of assessment, something that we could assess various vendors. And that came out of this two-pizza team plus the larger group, because we have a larger group of ICT faculty and IT staff within the region to create specific things that we must have or were nice to have requirements. Then we had to select vendors to demo. At the time, there wasn't that many that were going to be able to meet our requirements. And a funny fact is a couple that we were going to evaluate ended up under the covers, we're actually using practice labs. So it was almost looking at the same product. So then we selected vendors to demo, and then we did beta testing and created feedback regarding that beta test and did personal demos. So I want to stress that this is a commitment for application analysis by all the colleges and the faculty and the institutions to get to this point. So it was not done in a vacuum, as they say. And then we eventually selected Practice Labs as our virtual lab solution. Now, when I've discussed this before, a lot of individuals have asked me, well, what were the questions that you asked? So I put the in my PowerPoint, the grid. So these are the questions that we came up with. And I think we had 7 vendors that we were doing analysis on. And they had to answer each one of these. Again, partnering with CINED definitely helped going back and forth with the vendor management to get these answers and clarity. And Practice Labs by far was the appropriate selection for the region. Now, at this time, all 8 colleges are using this tool. They're using it in contract in contract ed, non-credit, and/or credit. We've just expanded it to access for our K-12 partners within the region to facilitate pathway work. And there's discussion with our 4-year partners. So again, leveraging this technology and this capability to serve our region and our students, faculty, and institutions has, to this point, been quite successful. So that's my spiel. And now I just thought I'd open up to any specific questions. My colleague, Ed Garcia, will speak specifically to the from the faculty perspective through this process.
Yeah, maybe we'll, unless it's some specific clarification, let's move to the general questions, save them for the end. It looks like we have a lot of interesting information queued up.
Okay, then I'll stop sharing and hand it over to Ed.
Okay, I'm launching my PowerPoint here, and let me move it over to the screen here where I'm sharing and fire that off. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Looks good.
Okay, so my name is Ed Garcia. I'm a faculty at Moorpark College. My other colleague is on the call here, Wayne Snyder. He's our other full-time colleague, and he's also used Practice Labs. And the department we run over there at Moorpark College is Computer Networking Systems Engineering program. So when I first started 15 years ago, one of the challenges that most of us have in our classroom is we have these labs that we would like to do, but are kind of difficult to set up. You know, we only have so much time, and we've struggled to find a solution that would have a pre-configured lab and allow us to give students an assignment to go into this lab with this pre-configured equipment and go through a set of processes, of procedures, and do a specific lab. For example, maybe doing a lab where you're installing Windows, a lab where you're setting up a VPN connection, a lab where you're trying to establish a radius authentication component. So, you know, you have in these IT courses, you have a wide variety of labs that you would like to offer your students. So Paula had suggested back in before June 2018 to consider. We all met as a consortium and we looked at Practice Labs, and it seemed to have a lot of labs that fit well with our IT curriculum. So after we decided to move forward with Practice Labs, we did our beta testing in June 2018, that summer. And basically what we did, we integrated it. So on my first bullet item, we worked through the integration of being able to work with Canvas, integrating these labs within Canvas so that when students completed a lab, it would update the gradebook, and being able to create assignments where a student goes into Canvas, clicks on an assignment, and it redirects them to a Practice Lab lab. So for example, let's say that they're doing a lab in a Cisco course where they have to configure a router, for example. And on that particular curriculum, on that particular chapter, it requires that specific exercise. Well, now what I can do, I can set up an assignment, and within Canvas, they click on the link, right away the student gets redirected to Practice Labs, and that specific lab will be a routing lab that matches with that particular topic at the curriculum at that particular week. So that component was something that I really like, is being able to give students the additional access where they could practice these labs at home. They could do the labs in the classroom while I'm there in the class with them as a group. They could do it on a Saturday or Sunday when they're at home, whenever they wanted to actually access these lab assignments through Canvas. So currently, we have at the college, at Morpeth College, we have 9 sections, a variety of courses. So if you look at bullet item number 3, we have Network Plus, Security Plus, the CompTIA CYSA, the Cisco courses, Windows courses, Linux, VMware. All these sections have the opportunity of using having a matching course that aligns with this curriculum, and they can do a practice labs, a variety of labs to reinforce what the objectives are for that particular exercise of that week, whether it be routing, a switching lab, configuring a Radius server, whatever it is. So we have about 11 sections in our department, and out of the 11 sections, we have 9 of them that we can use, that faculty can assign assignments where students can do practice labs. So in my Network Plus course, the courses that I teach, my Network Plus, my Security Plus, my TCP/IP protocols course, all of those sections that I'm teaching, I'm using practice labs through Canvas, and I can go into the gradebook. I can see what the status is of the labs week to week. So the benefits on my third screenshot here, the benefits, I like the fact that I can integrate practice labs with Canvas. I like the fact that it has a gradebook that I can check to see how students are doing, how they're progressing. What I also like is that the practice labs are well documented. So it walks students through steps, and it has specific tasks that students have to complete. And then the variety of labs vary in the complexity. Some are very basic, some are intermediate, and some are very, very advanced. So you have a variety of labs. Now, me as the instructor, I can go into the course module, and it may have 20 or 30 labs, and I can pick the specific lab that I want the student to do for that week. It may be 1 lab, it may be 2 labs. It depends on what lab I choose to assign for that week. Now, when the students are doing, on bullet item number 4, when the students are completing the labs as they're working through them, some of the labs have a feature where they can they click on a button that says take a screenshot, and that gives them a point in the gradebook. And then also some of the labs have mini quizzes, maybe like a 2 or 3 question quiz. I'll ask them, hey, on this previous exercise, what was the purpose of using spanning tree? What are its benefits? Is it to do loop prevention? Is it do routing prevention? Is it doing switching? Whatever. And students are basically measured to see, do they understand what that particular lab, what its focus was, and what the benefit of that specific technology is. So the lab itself will have an opportunity for the students to do a screenshot to capture evidence that they did the lab, and it also has the opportunity for students to do a mini quiz. Now on bullet item number 5, as Paula mentioned, what's nice also about these labs is that all the student needs is a browser. The labs are available, the practice labs are available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, anytime, any place. All they need is the internet access and a browser. And it'll connect via a remote desktop, and they can connect to the lab and get started. So that's another nice feature. Here's an example of a lab diagram. So what I'll do, for example, on some of my labs that I assign the students, I'll give them a printout in the classroom, or I'll have this posted on the Canvas link, and they have the ability to see the actual topology. And this is all available in the actual lab. But it kind of lays out the topology. They're using a domain controller, for example, a Windows server. There's a Windows 8.1 workstation, and there's a Windows 7 box, for example. And the students have very detailed, specific instructions as they're working through the lab that basically walks them through step by step. Now, the labs are very extensive. Some, like I mentioned, they can be very basic, they can be intermediate, and they can be advanced. So there's a variety of choices, and that's great. So on the previous screen, I showed you the topology. Now, on that specific lab, when the student starts the lab, here's an example where the lab is introducing what the student's supposed to do, and it talks about the very first task that they're going to be accomplishing, where they're going to be using the remote server administration tool, for example. And then they have the actual step that the student will accomplish as they're working through the lab. So the lab is very well documented. What I do is on my labs, I go into the lab itself, and then I'll print out a PDF, and I'll have that PDF link within the Canvas assignment so that the student can actually read the lab on the PDF, and then they could maximize the lab screen as they're working through the lab. The labs also have the documentation within the lab itself, so they can read it as they're doing the actual lab. But if they choose to do so, they can also read it on the PDF. So there's a lot of flexibility with practice labs. Here's another screenshot where the student, this is what one of the areas of the screen on the practice lab where the student has to navigate, and it'll say click on the Internet Explorer, do this on the right, click over here, do this over here on the Windows desktop, and they're working their way through the actual lab. It's the kind of stuff that you would expect to see, right? So what I also like about practice labs is that, for example, in my Security Plus course or my Network Plus course, on practice labs, they have a variety of courses, and each Network Plus course, for example, will have maybe 25 or 30 labs. And then there's an older or a different version of Network Plus that's also available on practice labs, and we'll have a different set of actual labs. So you literally have a whole menu of labs that I can choose from depending on what I want to cover that week. So there's multiple Network Plus lab courses, and in each one of those Network lab courses, there's 24 or 30, for example, specific labs. The same thing with Security Plus. There's a whole variety of Security Plus courses, and each course has a variety of labs. They have a multitude, literally 15 Microsoft desktop courses, server lab courses, they have another 10 or 15 Cisco lab courses to choose from. So there's a lot of choices in terms of labs. If you look at Module 6, it also includes Office labs, so Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Access. Bullet number 7, there's Python labs, there's a Python course, an HTML course, a Java course. So a lot of courses, including bullet number 8, which are some of the Certified Ethical Hacker labs, the CYSA labs, Wireshark. So I've used the Wireshark course that they have available through Practice Labs. I'm using that in my protocols course. So that's worked out very, very well also. And again, like I mentioned before, when I first got hired, I wanted to do a Radius lab. Well, that would require a lot of work. I have to go get the Radius server. Where do I host it? And how do I get 30 students all on the same page? And how do I configure it the same way when some of the workstations are slightly different? It's just a lot of setup time. Versus what I can do now, I can go into the course modules. I can find a Radius lab, and I can create an assignment within Canvas. And when the student clicks on the Radius Canvas assignment, it takes them right into the actual Practice Labs lab module, and they can actually use the pre-configured environment that describes what they're about to do using Radius and what the configuration, the steps that they need to take. And it's already been done for me. So instead of me spending time trying to figure out how am I going to set this up, what I can do is instead go into the actual module and do the lab myself, and then document the steps so I'm familiar with the steps themselves. And then if any issues come up, I've already done the lab myself, and I refresh my mind on what's required in setting up Radius. And so for me, it's a much better learning experience for myself, and it's better utilized time for my students and for myself, instead of me spending time doing setup time. So that's a great example, configuring Radius, doing a VPN configuration. So for example, I was looking at yesterday at the Radius labs. There were 4 labs that students can do dealing with Radius: configuration, advanced configuration, basic configuration, VPN with Radius, and access control with Radius. That's just an example of one. But again, there's a whole menu of labs that faculty can choose from, depending on what topic you wanted to cover in your course. So I like that flexibility. Also, another feature worth mentioning. So I have students that are doing internships, and what I've done is I created within my Canvas, I have links, and I have assignment links where students that are in my internships, I created an internship course through Canvas. And these are students that are getting ready to exit the program. They're about to graduate with their AS degree. So I'm giving them as I'm preparing them to enter the workforce, I want them to get certified, finish up their certification. So within Practice Lab, there's a separate exam bank. And I'm having students, as part of their internship, complete at least one certification that they put on hold. So they can use the Practice Lab exam bank and prepare for a specific certification that they're trying to pursue to update their skills. That's another benefit of Practice Labs. The second bullet item is that, again, the labs are very granular. They're very detailed. There's a lot of screenshots. So they're very well documented. So I like that component. I rarely get a call where a student is asking me, how do I do this? It's not clear to me, because it's overly clear. There's screenshots, there's written documentation, there's written instructions, there's screenshots of where they need to click. So it's pretty obvious what they need to do. That really hasn't been much of an issue for the students. Bullet item number 3, the labs are always on, always accessible from home, from work, and in the classroom. So for example, in my forensics course, we do labs in the classroom as a group. So that's a nice feature. And then my last bullet is that, again, some of these advanced labs, for example, I'm looking at some of the job bulletins, and I see that they want the security students to be familiar with the NetSys security tool. Well, guess what? There's an actual NetSys lab that they can do using Practice Labs. There's also labs using Nmap. So now that we're focusing more on developing our cybersecurity program, I can leverage some of the security labs within Practice Labs. So there's a lot of, we have a lot of courses that we offer in our curriculum, and from what I can tell, pretty much most of the Practice labs will meet my needs. There isn't much lacking so far. So I've been very pleased with the variety, with the selection of choices of labs. So that's pretty much my last slide. And I guess I can give it back to you, Paula, and we can address the Q&A component.
Well, Ed, that's really, you're obviously passionately like it. Can you think of anything about the experience or about it that you would suggest Practice Lab consider changing or updating?
I think probably the area that I would go after would be, I would like to know which students are not doing the labs. So if I could log into Practice Labs directly and just check their status. We have it integrated within Canvas, so I have to go through the Canvas gradebook. But for some schools, I'm wondering if they may want to log in directly to Practice Labs and check to see which students are not keeping up with the assignments.
Is it possible for a student to take these labs on a mobile device?
I haven't had that need yet. I'm not sure about that.
We hear that our millennials they use their mobile devices for almost everything these days. Most websites have to be designed for a mobile device first. I was just wondering, I mean, is this entrapped, and maybe the practice labs people can answer that question, but is it designed to be used on a mobile device as well?
Ricky, you want to answer that, Ricky?
Sure, thanks, Ed. I can. So, Stephen, to answer the question, yes. The reality is, so if you kind of look at tablet devices, the labs are fully functional when it comes to that platform, and even phones. My kind of counter argument to that is, that's probably more of a marketing checkbox exercise as opposed to a functionality piece. We'd expect these students, in most organizations, and we have quite a significant IT department here. I don't see anyone using a tablet device when they're trying to build a server or trying to remotely manage on a regular basis. So the functionality is supported, but the reality is that as much real estate as you can have, the better user experience you get.
Yeah, I would personally agree with you completely. I know we see a lot of data. A lot of these students doing their homework during their breaks at work or on the bus or this or the other. So a mobile device can be an advantage for
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you guys at Practice Labs, do you have a presentation you're going to go through today, or?
I'm going to do a live demo for everyone, just so you get a sense of what the platform's about. So,
okay. So
Ed, if you stop sharing your screen, then I'll kind of take over from there.
There you go.
Now, this is Albert Wolfke. I was going to echo essentially the screen discussion that you guys just had, which was you need high resolution in order to get the value out of the practice labs. I've had a few technical problems, but one of them was that students with low resolution home computers like 1024 by 768 can't capture certain information that they need or complete certain labs, because you really need lots and lots of screen real estate. Yeah. And a mobile device just wouldn't get there unless who knows what mobile device is coming next, but I get to see a 1280 by 1024 mobile device.
Augmented reality support services in the future, so who knows. But I'll show you a couple of options as well to readjust the interface. But before I jump into sharing the screen, firstly, thank you for everyone who could invest their time today. It's much appreciated. Thank you to Paula and Ed to give us a great introduction. I promise you, Ed doesn't work for Practice Labs, so there was no kind of hidden marketing in that. But Ed, thank you very much for your support over the last months in terms of getting us up and running with your students, and I'm glad it's providing value that you had hoped for. Just a 2-minute background to who we are at Practice Labs. So maybe to a number of people on the call, this may be your first introduction to us, and maybe you've heard of us before. But the background to the company is actually I came up with this idea 13, 14 years ago, and I come from similar to Paula, from industry. I was a Microsoft engineer, and the basis for the product being built was to meet the needs of improving the skills of junior engineers. So I'd seen the gap where students had come away from an official learning engagement, be it a instructor-led, potentially a night school type environment, come back to the office full of enthusiasm, a set of textbooks or manuals, but nowhere to continue that development, in a safe environment. So there was a very keen young engineer who said to me once, "Hey, Ricky, give me access to the production system so I can go and practice some more." That sent shivers down my spine, but kind of sparked the idea for how do we de-risk the corporate environment, but then meet the needs of these learners who want to continue to develop those practical skills. And that was the light bulb moment for us in terms of developing. So we've been around a little while. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen some really big adoption with the platform as we've kind of grown and moved into different areas, and primarily in the academic space, where we're seeing tremendous growth based on the platform and the content that we deliver. But that what drives us, I think, is really what I want to get across before we jump into the product. So our vision here at Practice Labs, and something we work to on a daily basis, is we have a vision to try and improve the IT skills of 1 million learners by 2023. Now, that number is driven through partnerships and engagements with schools and community colleges just like yourselves, to try and really make a difference to these individuals' lives by giving them not only skills that look good on paper, but skills that they can transfer into the workplace. How do we make people more work ready? How do we kind of address this employability issue that we have with certain students? So that kind of drives us. We strive to make the platform and our product and our content that useful to make sure that students are better today than they were yesterday. We pride ourselves on our support and collaboration with partners, so we always try and exceed the expectations of the people we work with. That's kind of our kind of key mantra. The other stuff falls into place, and if I go ahead and share my screen now, I'll take you through what this Practice Labs world really means in terms of a practical sense. So to set everyone's context of where we are right now, you heard Ed talking about curating some of the content within the Canvas learning management system. He's created an assignment potentially in a certain week. Week 1, we're talking about network vulnerabilities. I want to add a Practice Lab module to support that piece of learning. And imagine the student has clicked on the link and now they're brought into the Practice Lab environment. So in terms of the single sign-on piece and account fulfillment, it's all managed through LTI. So the account's created and now I'm ready to go. In terms of just a quick orientation, and I'll keep an eye on the time as well so we keep some time for questions. In terms of orientation of the platform itself, is broken up into 3 key areas. On the left-hand side, we have what we refer to as the content viewer. The content viewer, by its own definition, is where the actual, Ed showed us a little bit earlier, the lab diagrams are created and the instructional material is located. In the middle is what we refer to as the tools bar, and the tools bar is the element which kind of manages access to certain servers. So within the content viewer, you would be told what servers are relevant for this particular piece of work, and you would go and start those up. So go and power it on. And just to kind of, for definition, these are real virtual devices or virtual machines, hardware, real active instances of those. It's not a simulation-based product. You actually are working on it. So based on the content, you have the ability to turn on these different servers. However, if you wanted to, there's a little feature where you can power everything on, and the diagram shows you that everything is kind of networked together. So there's communication from this server here through the router to something on the edge. People ask me sometimes, why this naming convention, PLAB DC01? I suppose it goes back to our early years of coming from that kind of corporate environment, so to speak. We're trying to get learners into the habit of not just coming up with sample names or test names, workstation 1, server 3. It's trying to give a little bit of work experience in terms of naming conventions that potentially they could see. So which is why we stick to something like that. And then what we have on the right-hand side here is the actual console that the learner would work in. Now, one of the speakers earlier said you need a higher resolution screen to see everything. Now, in this particular example, you can see I have these scroll bars around, which is not functional at all. I mean, you can use it, but it needs to be a little bit better. In that case, we have this fit to screen option within the tools bar. You can see we'll resize the window. Let's go back to that server. We resize the window so you can see as much of the desktop as possible. So it resizes it. Depending on how much real estate you do have, you could move the content window. So if I kind of move it across, you can see it's quite dynamic in terms of what you can see. And then I would just go and resize the window to make sure that I get the content and the console view in a good state to kind of read and work at the same time. Let's just kind of get into a document. So you'll see now we're ready to do some work. In this first exercise, I don't need to explain what the lab contents are, but I'm just giving you this outline. You understand the benefits of it. In this particular one, these are the 3 devices you'll be using. And then you start taking the student through the step-by-step instruction. What we're trying to do is not specifically replace all learning materials. So we sit alongside the theoretical content, and we assume some knowledge when the student arrives at this place. So we're giving them this guidance, but we're not going into the history of the different versions of IIS or what is a web server. We're assuming some knowledge that when you come into this, you have a basic understanding of the terminology we talk about. Ed touched on this a little earlier in terms of the screenshots, and the history around screenshots is what we had found very early on is sometimes learners were sometimes apprehensive of breaking the environment. So if you give just a series of instructions, they became apprehensive in just following them in case I broke it. So now with having the screenshot in play, what you do get is kind of a understanding of what the outcome would be. So if I go and click on add and remove roles, the desired outcome would be it changes the screen. And now you're starting to build confidence because the student can see what is happening in a visual representation. As we know, in the modern world, we don't like to read extensive blocks of text. So we again try to keep it quite lean in terms of how much information we give. This is the direction on how to do it. So the learner would work their way through installing this particular piece of software. Down at the bottom, and let me move on to the next one, Ed was talking about this ability to capture screenshots, and I hope I've come into a course that has. So we've been challenged over the years, and as we improve the product, to do a couple of different things. One is to prove student engagement, and the second piece is ensuring students have actually got something from the content they've just covered. So how do we provide some type of formative assessment to the work being covered? So what we've introduced into the labs, certainly in a lot of the new courses, is this ability to take screenshots. And this is the element to kind of look at student engagement. So if I've kind of completed the piece of work that's required of me, I now have a screenshot that is taken from the system. So we're eliminating some of those things where potentially as instructors or faculty, you are requesting students to provide a lab report and expecting them to take that screenshot or provide some information. As you know, not everyone works in the same standard. So potentially you get different size screenshots, different resolutions on computers, so it might be difficult to read. Here we have it taken by the system, so it's a consistent, repeatable process. In the case where actually, what I've changed, I need to change that screenshot, I've got the wrong one. These can be updated, so we just retake it. And importantly, and my account has done lots of demos, if you have a student account, we actually watermark that on the image as well, the student's ID from a system perspective, and a date and time stamp, which means it's very difficult to share these amongst them because it's linked to that specific session. let me go to the little bit at the end. Just I'm aware of time, and then I'll kind of go to the additional features on the side. Ed also mentioned in the content now we have these assessments which are built into the content viewer. These come in different modes. So we have, in this particular mode I'm showing you here, is what we would refer to as learning mode. So the student can answer the question. That one happens to be correct. Let's see if we get one incorrect here. Uncanny. Let's get an incorrect one. So I get an incorrect here. So I get some feedback on why it's incorrect. In learn mode, I have the ability to go back and change my answer. However, if we lock this down to more of an assessment mode, the students will get the feedback, but not the ability to change their answer. Once they've completed these questions, you've got a little report to see which items you've missed or actually completed. When I submit that report, at that stage, we do a calculation of the question items. We don't grade the screenshot items because there's a limitation around that as well. That is to prove engagement, not necessarily a scoring element. But once I submit this, we actually have the ability to send the score from the assessment back to the gradebook. So now from the instructor perspective, when you're looking at kind of student progression, you could go and have a look at the gradebook. One, it'll tell you who has actually completed this assessment. And then secondly, what the score was for the results of the questions. My opinion on this is not to try and gauge the ones that are doing well, but more the learners that are struggling. So in the class, in 90, 80, but what we're looking for, those students who are struggling, maybe at 30, 20%, to go and give them some additional help. This report, or this take, let's call it, gets recorded in a report that the student has the ability to download so they can see what they answered. A copy of the screenshots will exist as well, and they could upload that as a manual assignment into Canvas or share with the instructor or their professor to review what they've actually put into that results. So that's kind of at a very high level what's happening. The labs, you follow along with the content, but can be used as a sandbox environment as well. So we have controlled internet access where you could download, especially think in the lines of the cybersecurity world, an application that you might not want students to download on your classroom PCs, blocked by a firewall. This environment has the ability to install these files either through the internet, or we have like a repository of different tools that we've identified and downloaded. In terms of usage, students, we've got an auto logout here which says 56 minutes, but this is only active if the student is idle. That's an idle timeout. Every time we move within the interface, it gets reset to 60. If I click on the timer itself, it gets reset. The stuff down here, and this one's quite important. So a little earlier I said students sometimes become apprehensive of wanting to break the environment. We don't encourage breaking it, but what we do say is, look, go in and push the boundaries. This is what the platform is there for. The more you experiment, the more you'll learn. And if you do break it, well, great. Here's your safety net. Hit the reset button. This particular device will shut down. The original configuration will be applied and it starts up again. And you can do the same thing for the whole lab. You can reset the whole lab back to the beginning. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, well, can a student stop halfway through the lab and come back to it? The answer is no, but two kind of reasons for that. One, the content we try to keep to an hour or less to make sure that the student can complete it. The upside of saving state is great. Student comes back and can carry on from where they left off. The downside, obviously, is what happens if they break something in a persistent mode. The first person they're going to call is the instructor. Hey, please, can you help me? I installed something. I made this change. How do I rectify it? Which would eat into your time. Coming into the labs with a clean, fresh base and a predictable outcome, certainly we found is far more beneficial than the odd occasion where the student needs a point-in-time saving mechanism to move forward. Support services, which I think are very important when certainly the initial engagement came to light with Paula's group, the ability for support. So we have a 24/7 first-line support team. The ability to log a support call is through the application itself and through the console or email. In terms of support documentation, this is where on the very first time a student launches Access, we provide some videos to get them orientated to the platform. We have user guides, we have helpers. Some of this information may or may not be available to each of the individuals, the students, depending on your settings. But those support services are here. In actual fact, we've just built what we refer to as Module 0. So this is the first module any student should do. And it takes you through in a very similar layout to an actual course or an actual title, takes you through the different elements of the labs, power on, reset, and that's your orientation before kind of jumping into it. That module can actually be linked in Canvas as well, or any LMS that you're using if it supports LTI. We actually have an API, as well, that could be leveraged to integrate to the labs as well. Lots of different things in terms of layout. You can in the settings piece, you can launch these as standalone items. So if you had two screens, you could have a pop-up of the desktop. Ed said he likes to give the students a PDF to look at. You could then collapse the content viewer. And Stephen, this is where we kind of see students using it on a mobile device. They would go full screen. You can imagine this being a tablet, full screen, so they can see as much of the real estate as possible, and then toggle between that and the content to kind of work through these things. I know we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that everyone has the ability to ask a question and that I can answer. So a lot of different pieces in terms of functionality, technical support. We use standard HTTP or HTTPS connections, no special ports required to go out the firewall. One last thing just to touch on, one of the requirements certainly from the academic institutions we work with in the US is accessibility requirements. We work very, very hard on that element of our platform, to the tune where we actually engage with the Royal National College of the Blind here in the UK to get not only a VPAT document produced to kind of say what level we support, but actually having students engage with the platform to make sure that this goes beyond a checkbox exercise, to make sure that students who actually need that type of technology, assistive technology, can use the lab platform to the best of its ability. So we have this advanced accessibility mode. The only one that's really useful for us to show in this type of demo is the high contrast mode, and then changing the size of the text to suit. But an area we work tirelessly on to make sure that we are meeting the needs for all students. So that being said, I know we kind of 5 minutes left. Why don't we take some questions, or I saw some come up in the chat that I could have a look at, and the others might just throw up on the phone.
Well, I just like to lead by saying it's a very impressive demonstration, and certainly hearing from Ed, the user perspective, I think most people here in the community college system would be favorably inclined to ask the next question, which is, well, how much does it cost? and I know that it depends is usually the answer. And but do you look at pricing on a per seat basis or a semester basis, or what kind of packaging alternatives do you guys use?
Our standard off the shelf, I suppose, to give you just some indicative pricing, and Stephen, you're 100% right. It does depend on how many students, how many courses. But if we had an off the shelf e-commerce purchase, for want of a better term, and a student was going from either a bookstore or coming to our e-commerce platform, a single lab, so a Network Plus lab with all the modules. So I'll just take a step back in terms of what modules mean. So all the modules go back one more, that are included in that. So terminology is important. Some people refer to all the different labs. So in this one, 25 to 30 different topics that we cover, 2 or 3 labs per topic, is $81 for 12 months unlimited access. Then if we start talking about institutions and actually integrating into the learning management system, there we kind of become more of a technology partner. So that reduces down to $47.50 per user for the same course. So like I say, there's quite a big range there, but it would, depending on the school needs, how many titles, we've been around long enough to know, we wish it was a cookie cutter that everyone would just use, but everyone has different needs, different number of titles, library access, single title access. Ed mentioned we had another product, the exam prep piece. Is that bundled in? Isn't it bundled in? But that should give you some indicative. Off the shelf,
Ricky, this is Paula. Let me also add that third-party licensing is also part of these labs, so you don't necessarily need to have an extra Microsoft license as well. It's bundled together depending on what the lab is covering. I think for our region, how we approached it and doing it from a region perspective, and we could also partner as multiple regions, is the volume discount. Obviously the more we provide seats, the less the price, right, Ricky?
Yes, Paula, of course.
Well, I mean, in the community college system, each college is a single fiscal agent for what they do. Sometimes we can aggregate demand by region or by district, conceivably statewide, and depending on how that sizes up, that could be something worth looking into.
Absolutely. And we kind of agnostic on titles. So we don't kind of go down the volume route of saying, well, you need to buy so many Network Pluses. It's across the school and for any title. So we try and make sure it's fair for everyone and not tied to a specific class and volume. We look at it, we really do try and engage as being a partner in this with the school to go, how do let's not see, it's not about a short-term engagement. It goes back to the vision. We want to be partnered with the right people to make sure, to help really make a difference in terms of reaching this 1 million learners, to improve those skills. So we try and be fair, and it's a partnership engagement to make the best use of it, not only from the student perspective, but from faculty and instructors and the school as well. If the school is producing better skilled individuals, that's making those individuals more employable, which means the school has a better reputation, which means the local economy is benefiting from it as well, because we've got people who can actually go and do jobs. So we look at it on a holistic view than just a quick buck to try and make from a school and move on to the next engagement.
So how far are you along in that 1 million learner commitment?
So the vision officially kicked off last year. We have about 300,000 total, but we started last year, so we 130,000 into it in 15 months. So we're kind of growing on this month-by-month basis to get there.
Well, you're wise to go after the California market. We have 2.5 million students in our community college system, so it's a good place.
Yeah, well, and it's driven by that, but also, of course, it needs to be useful for the students. Ultimately, that's the key piece.
Yeah, we share that concern. Does anybody else here have a question? I see a few in chat. Maybe Ricky, you could take a look at those. But
sure, I'm looking at that now.
Have a question you'd like to verbalize?
Hey, Steve, it's Sean.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is there an additional charge for LMS integration. So most of our colleges statewide are using Canvas now. And you talked about the integration with the LMS. Is there a charge?
Sean, all included. It's our commitment to the partnership. So we work with, whether it's faculty or some type of system administrator, to get the labs incorporated into the system. We are IMS global compliant, so the LTI, for want of a better term, the group that kind of maintain the LTI standards. So we're an official vendor on there. So most of the learning management systems now have a practice labs plugin as well. So if that doesn't help, then we help directly, but no charge for that.
Thank you.
Well, there's one last question I'd like us to address, because Carmen's been waiting patiently. Do the steps in the simulation get saved in the system as a student progresses at the end of completing the activity? I'm wondering what happens if a student gets suddenly disconnected.
Disconnected, not a problem. We have, I think it's a 20 or 25 minute window where, so let's say the student was at home, internet goes down, they have to reboot their PC. Within it's 20 or 25 minutes, the exact number escapes me, but if they log back into Canvas, launch the same learning module or assignment, they will reconnect to their lab environment and continue from where they left off. Okay. What we don't have is I'm taking a deliberate action to stop at this point in time. I want to come back in 2 days to continue where I left off. That functionality doesn't exist. And I say it doesn't exist. We have the capability of delivering it, but it just becomes cost prohibitive then for the institutions that need it. So we've tried to build the content in such a way that, you know, it takes no more than an hour to consume that piece. We're working even in our new design to try to bring that down to a 30-minute piece of learning, so that it really negates this need for having to pause halfway through.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now, because we do have a commitment to everybody to keep this within an hour.
Can I ask one quick question, Stephen?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. So for example, for the Cisco labs, do students have the ability to save their configurations and paste them back into devices once they come back into a lab?
Yes, absolutely. So Cisco is slightly different. So we actually have an export feature. So you can email the config to yourself, or you can copy it out of the interface, save it to text file, and then reapply it when you come back.
Cool, thanks.
All righty then. Any other last minute have-tos? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers today for putting on a wonderful, informative presentation. Paula, your work in discovering practice labs and the due diligence you did in a very professional, business-like way is the kind of work that we all need to do when we're looking at ed tech. It's a very complicated world out there. I appreciate that. And Ed, you going ahead and testing it like you did and giving us the feedback from the field, what really happens, what it feels like, that's invaluable to everybody. And of course, John and Ricky at Practice Labs, thank you so much for taking the time and developing such a fine product.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
With that, we'll let it go for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, Stephen, cheers. Thank you.